What's going on, everybody? BobbyFi back with Sheets on whatever day quarantine it might be for you. It is now number 7 for me. Sheets, what have we been keeping our minds busy with? Why don't you start me and let me know what's going on?
Yeah, so first of all, kind of weird, I'll give you a weird story from the front lines. I'll give you a weird Singapore story. So Singapore put out a travel restriction about a week ago where they wanted to really protect themselves from people traveling in other Asian countries that, weren't taking as good care as they were. So about a week or so ago, they said, listen, if you have traveled anywhere outside of Singapore in certain countries, whatever they were, within the last 14 days, upon return to Singapore, you're going to be subject to a 14-day, state quarantine. Okay. And they gave you and I was kind of worried because my daughter's there. I'm like, well, does that mean that if she traveled outside of Singapore that maybe she couldn't leave if she wanted to go back home to New York after that? No, it wasn't that. It was that, if you couldn't come into Singapore, having traveled to those countries, right? So my daughter literally had just gotten back from a trip to Thailand, like literally a day before that rule was put in. So she kind of, if she had come back one day later, she would have had problems. But she's fine, and she's coming home actually, and whatever. But the reason I mention this is, her program, they have other kids in it too, and what they do is every weekend or so they travel to other countries. Like they go to Malaysia, they go to Thailand, whatever it is. And so one of the girls in the program, they had traveled to Bali about maybe about a week or so ago. They were already back. And in the meanwhile, their programs are now kind of closing and saying, listen, you got to go back to the United States. And their home programs say, yeah, you got to come back home. So everybody's kind of scrambling to leave. And the good thing is that travel restriction doesn't bother them necessarily, because they're not, even though they traveled to any of those countries, they are actually leaving Singapore. So like Singapore doesn't care, you know what I mean? Like there's also, you don't come back within those 14 days. So this other girl had the flight to go back to, wasn't New York, wherever she's from in the United States. And she was about to leave today, and she actually went through customs there in Singapore and was at the gate awaiting to be called to board the flight, where she learned that the flight was canceled. Okay, that's a pretty bad inconvenience. The flight's inconvenienced that the flight's canceled, but you know what? Take the flight tomorrow. There's usually one flight to these, back each day. No big deal. It's a real pain in the neck, but you should go back to her apartment and come back the next day. No such luck, because what happens is once she went through security and cleared customs and was at the gate, she had already technically left Singapore, which means that now she couldn't get back in because that travel restriction now applied to her. So not that she couldn't get back in, but now that she walked right over that line and then came back through it, now she's in 14-day quarantine in Singapore and can't go home. So again, it wasn't anybody's fault per se, but it was a kind of a weird coincidence / glitch in the system, I suppose, where she's now, just kind of stuck there. So that's like the one kind of
Sorry, man.
bizarre thing that happened. And it's a really nice girl too. And
yeah.
Not that it would be better if it happened to someone awful, but it happened to be a nice girl also. But and so I wish her to get back pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm sorry for you guys to have to be going through that. I mean, that's just a crazy situation.
Yeah. So okay. So you know what I want to do. So let's since you brought it up, we're gonna continue this this kind of not stock market teaching, but the stock market kind of like neat little exercise. And I want to use something as an example, right? So let me just hold on. What I want to do, and he did not know that Bobby did not know I was going to do this. So we are going to share my screen and we are going to share my Twitter feed. Okay. So in the Twitter feed, I'm looking at a tweet from Bobby Firestone, who is retweeting something by Britt Devine, who's a sharp guy, works at Rotogrinus, whatever. And about 4 hours ago, the tweet was, "From a dead company to this, I was not on this," posting a chart and a thing of APRN, which Blue Apron, without even looking at it, I knew what it was going to be. It was going to be a company that was on the front lines of probably of developing a vaccine of some kind, or some kind of healthcare thing relating to the coronavirus, right? So, and even Bobby said, feels like more of us should have been on this. Okay, so sounds good to me. It makes sense, right? These companies that are going to be working on there, you would think that they'd be something you want to do. Okay, so Britt's like, I was not on this, so you got a chance. You could have bought it right there at 23 with the exact same idea, and 3 hours later it's 12. Okay, so it's rough out there. You know what I mean? It is just not that easy, you know. But one thing I will say is that some what some people do, like the real risky people, what they'll do, and want to tie this into DFS a little bit, is about like 2 or 3 weeks ago, you know, when you knew this coming to the United States, what some people did was they took a bunch of these types of companies and just kind of bought a basket of them. You know what I mean? Like bought like 15 of them. The equivalent of DFS, if you knew that there was going to be one of these 10 3K guys that were going to hit, but you just didn't know which one, you know what I mean? You'd put in these 10 3K guys and hope that one of them kind of smashed for you. So that's what a lot of people would do is kind of plug in, you know, Blue Apron Holding. I never heard of these guys either. And other companies like it with the idea that maybe one of them would pop. But again, now not to say it's impossible with the stock market, because again, one day I'll describe my methodology or whatever. But even if you did know that this company was on the forefront, whatever, like you kind of need a plan. Like, let's say that you bought this thing at $6 or wherever the hell you could have bought it at. What's the plan? What's the idea? When it got to 23, for example, right? If someone bought it at 6, you got to get into their mindset. You know, you took a shot thing at 6, and if you ask them, well, you got a shot now. Now it's at 23. You can hold it, you can sell it, or you can buy more. What do you want to do? You know what I mean? So it's not as if, okay, I knew this company. So what do you do with it now? Do you sell it at 23? Do you think it's going to go to 200, which I think, you know, some people might think? Or do you think, wow, this is a big upswing, maybe I should sell it at 23? And if you're going to say that you would have done that, well, then why wouldn't you have sold it at 8 when it went from 4 to 8? You know what I mean? These are not simple decisions, and there's nothing worse than nothing worse. There's nothing that's a better example of the power of hindsight than the stock market, because you look at, boy, why didn't I just do this? And all I would have done, check this out, check out Blue Apron Holdings. All I had to do was, okay, it's March 1st. I know the virus is coming out, buy a bunch of these. And all I have to do is know to sell it at exactly at 22. And I'm a genius. You know what I mean? It's very tricky, and it's very difficult, and as such. So again, like same thing, like, you know, Trump just got on and said, we're going to fast track all these things. Everything is whatever. I don't even know Blue Apron Holdings is. But let's just say that I went through it and said it showed it's a leading manufacturer, such and such. They're on the forefront of coronavirus vaccines, and it's fast tracked or whatever. So Trump just made this announcement. Why is that not already in the stock? You know what I mean? Like, if everybody was just told this, why is the stock worth this and not 2? Not why is it worth this and not 100? You know what I mean? It's and these types of nuances, and it's not even a nuance. It's really like the primary premise of stock market investing is, does what's already out there already factored into the stock? And if you are going to say it isn't, what gives you the power to say that? What do you know more than the rest of the people? You know, so it's so you were gonna mention Bitcoin, and I don't know much, again, you know, from a whatever perspective about Bitcoin, but so you were about to mention that Bitcoin was up 30% or something like that?
Over the last 2 days, it's up about 30%, but it also had dropped before that.
Right. So like, and here's another thing. Like, you know, I certainly could teach you guys something about intelligence, CNBC
I've got it a little bit higher. I wonder what we're seeing differently here. I've got it at 62, but whatever.
No, you could be looking at the cash or whatever. Mine could even be delayed. I'm just looking at Yahoo, at a Yahoo price anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? These could be, this is 521. So this is 521 GMT. So this is probably 3 minutes behind or something.
Okay, maybe I will see. Yeah.
Well, whatever it is. The point of the matter is here's some intelligent CNBC watching. So you look at this. This is kind of a 5-day chart, right? And on a 5-day chart, you'd be like, oh wow, it's like really swinging up, whatever it is. It really depends on what chart fits your narrative. You know what I mean? Like if you want to say, boy, I'm in Bitcoin for, well, look at this. This is a max chart going all the way back to 2014. Like if you sign on for this, I don't know, would you be interested in this? Would you really?
Yeah.
So the implicit in what you're asking is, not so much why is the thing up, because unfortunately the answer to why anything is up is always the same. And this is half sarcastic, but simply because more people are buying it than selling it, right? So, but the underlying thing is, well, why are more people buying it than selling it now? And it's when you talk about intelligent CNBC watching, when you watch CNBC or watch FNN and they say stock market is up because of this, that is basically irresponsible reporting, because when people buy something on the stock market, they don't put a little note in when they buy it, this is why I'm buying it. They'll put a little note, this is why I'm selling it. And what ends up happening is, like, let's say the other day when the Federal Reserve cut rates, by a full basis point and full economic stimulus was entered, what ended up happening is the market ended up down 2,000 the next day, right? And what people, and the reports on CNBC were this: markets down for fear that interest rate cuts were not going to be enough to stimulate the economy. However, they were all ready for a reason. If the market was up 2,000, they would have said stock market up 2,000 because the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates and issued a great stimulus package, right? So when you feel about why something is happening, that's a very, very tricky thing to gauge. Now, again, when you say it's up 30%, okay, we talk about arbitrary inflection points. It's up 30%. What, for the last 2 days?
Just keep going, because the only point I want to make out about Blue Apron and Bitcoin is it arbitrary really? The reason why it would make sense for people to buy it more is because these are things that okay, so let's start with Blue Apron on one hand. It's a meal delivery service that delivers the ingredients.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
Going towards out of business. It was $2 on Monday. The stock was, and they were on the verge of. But all of a sudden, they surged up to as high as what were they at? The highs, they were up 16.5 or something.
23, right?
23. Oh yeah, that's what it was. My bad.
Right.
That was this morning article I'm reading. So in a world like today, you could see why people would think something like that would be more popular. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's where we're at. At the same time, my argument for Bitcoin, and look, this is coming from a very naive person to a very educated person. I just wanted to explain my thought process, maybe the average person, some people's thought process, with the lack of trust in government and with the lack of trust in what's happening at all right now, and not to mention that there's an outside chance that there's the way that Bitcoin is set up, or the way that all crypto. There's a chance that this could be the banking of the future. That's what that's sort of proposed. Why wouldn't this be a time where it would spike because of that, especially as people can rely less on these companies like Bank of America? All these companies are going to have to lay off employees. They're going to be in trouble. They're going to have to pay rent for places that aren't going to be allowed to be open, potentially. And it just seems like people would gravitate more towards some sort of an online-based business. I don't know how to say it the right way, but you could see where someone would make some naive, whatever, someone who's inexperienced like me would have that. Yes, it's the same thing. The only stock I ever made a significant amount of money on, and I made about 15 times on my money, was SiriusXM a long time ago when it was selling in the cents, because the question was, do you think this will keep existing? And at some point, I just said, okay, I will. And I had a lot of friends advise me to do it, so I did it, and it was phenomenal. But I don't know. I don't have a great argument. I'm just telling you what I think people are going to think about is, wouldn't we trust the more online stay-at-home type of business? And I know that Bitcoin doesn't exactly fit into that category, but I think that banks and stuff like that are going to have a hard time going forward a little bit. So just throwing out a very, layman's perspective on at least what a lot of people.
No, that's all. Everything that you just said, narrative driven, which is correct, makes perfect sense to me, right? And it makes perfect sense to everybody. right? So two things I would suggest with respect to whether you to buy Bitcoin or to buy the other stock we talked about, or buy whatever, is here's kind of a hypothetical. Is it possible that both things are right? Not both things. Is it possible that, yes, Bitcoin as an industry and blockchain as an industry will continue to grow, that people will become more reliant on digital coins, that companies will go to digital coins, that the banking system will be less trusted, all of that being correct, and Bitcoin as a trading currency be $80?
Mm-hmm.
It can. There's a difference between the success of the underlying business model and the success of the stock or the representation of that business model as it's being traded. Like for example, I go back again, just when we talked about this in a couple of sessions ago, where I talked about back in 1998, 1999, when all the internet stocks were blasting through the roof. And the logic, which was completely uncontrovertible, was that the world was going to move to an internet age, that internet business was going to be incredibly important, that internet companies would be incredibly important, and internet companies would be the wave of the future, that very few people would shop at Sears anymore. They would buy stuff from online and things like that. And what happened was, because of that narrative, which turns out to be 100% accurate, right? That so many of these internet stocks went to like really high, because what the stock market does, and what any speculation market does, is it prices out well in advance what the expectations of those underlying securities are. So what happened was that the people that said that those stocks were but some of those stocks were overvalued, ended up being right. And also the people that said that those companies were going to be huge and that type of business model was going to run the world, they were right also. You for every like Amazon and other company like that went up like 100-fold since then, even the stock, there are been very, very successful internet companies that have benefited from that same narrative, mm-hmm. who unfortunately, because of the way their stock was priced, people that bought into, and I could go through some of these, bought some of these stocks at like $80, they're worth like $1 now. And yet the company itself is still really strong. But what happened is people over speculated on the growth rates of these things. And as a result, the people that didn't know how to manage those positions along the way really, really suffered. So I'm not going to compete with the narrative that Bitcoin as a technology is going to be really strong. It's already that's a fait accompli. I mean, it's incredibly strong as it is. And yeah, you could certainly make the argument with banks as a, people being a little less trusted in banks. Yeah, you would think that maybe people would, or at least some of the younger people or the sharper people would say, oh, maybe it's even going to be more important of a technology. So yeah, you could say that is why it's up, whatever it's up over 6 or 6,000 or 60, depending on what method you use to evaluate it. And I remember using Bitcoin as the proxy, right? Because there are other just far more speculative coins that are in some way reflective of the same narrative, but have various levels of a fundamental, backbone to them, right? I'm not even getting into any of those, but when it comes to, investing or betting or whatever in this stuff like this, I would just caution again that the price of the underlying security that reflects your narrative is not necessarily accurately or appropriately priced for the strength of your narrative going forward. And what also thing I would say is that if you're going to speculate in anything, is you need to either have a plan for what to do if it reaches a target price, or at least have a plan to have a plan. Like at least, okay, here's an example. A client of mine who's in my hedge fund, but as a lot of people are, they have money elsewhere, they have their play money, they speculate and stuff. And then I get this from time to time. He says, well, Eric, this has nothing to do with your fund. Your fund's doing great. You're keeping us protected. But my wife's parents, their country club, they're all talking about that we should be buying these banks because they're really, really underpriced, they're whatever. And maybe it's a good shot to take. I know you wouldn't probably advise me to do this in ever, but I hear about this. What do you think about this? And I said, listen, and this is, I get this not all the time because people don't do it me that much anymore because they know what I'm going to say. The problem is that if I tell you that, if I give you the authority to do this, like if I say, yeah, makes sense to me, go ahead, go buy Bank of America, whatever it is, or buy XYZ, or buy that other stock we had, or buy Bitcoin at this. The problem is that I'm not going to be kind of watching it for you. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be constantly monitoring the way the psychology is affecting the price of that stock and how the fundamentals change. And I don't want you guys and you and all your friends to go buy something which makes sense from a narrative perspective and not be able to kind of follow the progress of that along the way. And not to mention the fact that how this fits into the rest of your portfolio and the rest of what you're trying to do. So again, when you're betting on something, whether it be investing in a stock or whatever, you need to have some kind of constant plan for monitoring, whether it's still kind of considered worth having your money in. And I guess like the last thing I will say on this is I always try to stress this to people, and this is a really tough thing for people to grasp. I want you to think, Bobby, if you had you had money in the stock market, you had money in like 30 different stocks or however many different stocks you had, and you've had it in there and you've been holding them for however long you've held them for, and now the market is down, whatever it is, and you're in the situation. Here's a question I have. This is a hypothetical question everybody has to ask themselves. If you had nothing but cash and you were offered the opportunity to buy all of these stocks right now, which you are, right? Because it's a liquid market, would you do so right now? And unfortunately, if the answer is no, you shouldn't be holding them at all. You know what I mean? And now there's certain things. Okay, so if there are tax implications of selling them, okay, forget that. There are transaction cost effective selling them, forget that also. But that's the thing that's kind of hard for people's psychology to understand, is that there's really no such thing as I don't want to buy it, I don't want to sell it, I just want to hold it. It really doesn't exist, because if you didn't want to buy it here, then you shouldn't own it in the first place, right? You shouldn't own it. Like if you wouldn't buy it here, you shouldn't hold it, because the stock doesn't know when you bought it. You know what I mean? Like if you're holding something at 30, you bought it at 100, the stock doesn't know that you bought it at 100 as opposed to 30. If you bought it at 1, if it's at 30, you should be equally inclined to either buy it, sell it, or whatever. Forget the tax part for a second. Doesn't matter where you kind of bought it. And that is another thing that's incredibly difficult for people to grasp, because people's psychologies really mess with their heads. And when I do my fund, every single day, my one little thing I always do is I look up at my board, I look up at my portfolio, and this is exactly what I say. If I were starting my fund right now with just all cash, is this exactly what I would buy? And is this exactly what I would short? And if there's anything in there that I wouldn't do, I just get rid of it, because why have it? So it's as I like to say sarcastically, it's rough business, but it is rough business, because the stock market messes with it has all these cross currents. It's your knowledge of the fundamentals, fine. It's your knowledge of the way psychology moves price points, fine. And then it's the managing of your own psychology and your own, algorithms, or if you want to call them that, and being able to manage positions along the way. So it's I think it is kind of fascinating in a way, but it's very tough.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate everything that you went into. That was really helpful, like really good stuff. The one thing before we stop talking about the stock market, I wanted to ask you, doesn't this seem like a time, if you were a skilled day trader, that this would be like the ideal time, because of the fluctuations should be all over the place? And just for day traders I'm talking about, not anything else. Just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, you make the presumption, you make a very important presumption. The skilled day traders, right?
Right.
People that are really good at it. And again, same thing. Like you don't know, like going in, what's going to happen, right? So what's happening in the last week or two is certainly a lot of what they call volatility. In other words, the actual, the movement one way or the other has been just much bigger than it has been. So the volatility that's available for day traders, or for anybody for that matter, I mean, there could be a day trader, you know what I mean? Just depends on when you feel like selling it, is really high. So of course that means the risk is really high also, right? With that kind of volatility. So yeah, I mean, if you are an expert at that, if you can really do that really well, and as I always like to say, there are plenty of ways to skin a cat in any industry. You know, you can make money, you know, in League of Legends head-to-heads. You know what I mean? You can make money in, if you're really good at that, you can make money in NBA GPPs. You know what I mean? It depends what you're good at. And if you're a totally expert day trader, yeah, I'm sure. But I don't know if it's any more of a edge now. Now I'd have to think about that. If there's more in an edge now than there usually is. On the one hand, you would say, well, with more volatility, there's more room for you to maximize your edge, right? Because it makes decisions harder. I guess that's fair. I guess that's fair. If you're a really good expert day trader, that maybe this is a better environment for you than the environments where things are just kind of flat, I suppose. Because maybe the transaction costs will eat you up a little bit more because the volatility that you will want from your positions will get swallowed up by the transaction costs. So I guess that's fair to say that in this type of market, that the day traders, if you're really, really good at it, you know, you still have these big 5% swings one way or the other. Yeah, it makes I guess that makes sense. I'm not one of those people, but
yeah, no, I was just kind of curious about just that sort of in general. Oh my God, what is this video? Okay, so other than the market, this is a good stuff. I think we should keep touching on this stuff because I feel like some people are interested in it. And the one thing that I'm wondering is, like, you know, we've heard about all this football news lately.
Sure.
So I'm curious. I do think it's an interesting timing for all of it. But aside from that, like, who do we really? I'm trying to. What do we really? It's hard because it sounds so trivial to talk about football. But let's talk about some of the things that happened. Tom Brady is now on the Bucs. We don't know who the Patriots quarterback's going to be. It's the end of an era. That was a very strange, abrupt way that it ended. Although I guess it wasn't that abrupt. But it is, you know, it's a weird new football world, even if we get football back. So assuming we get football back, also the weird comments made by the coach, Houston's coach, in relation to DeAndre Hopkins, which forced that trade. I mean, there's been some big shakeups in the NFL here, and I think that there's like some stuff we're talking about. I do want to just say real quick, my first take on the Brady going to Tampa Bay. I can understand all the people out there. And my initial thought was, yeah, I'd rather have Jameis too. When you start looking at the turnover numbers, when they're messing with that kind of an offense that has that much power, you probably have two of the top 10 receivers in the NFL, probably as talented a tight end as there is, even though he hasn't put it together yet. And some decent other pieces, especially on the D-line. So I feel like this is a team that maybe they really are on the – I like Arians as a coach. I think that they may be one to look out for. You're not going to get any great odds on them because I do think people are, you know, especially with the Brady, it's going to be like, you know, more people are going to be betting them than probably should be. But I think they're an interesting thing to talk about, and I'm just sort of curious to gather your thoughts because I'm much on the side of this was going to happen at some point, but it still feels weird to me, the Brady-less Patriots. I'm wondering, do the Patriots make the playoffs next year? Where does this put Tampa Bay? And I still don't really feel like I have an answer.
Yeah, so I do have a little bit of an opinion on these types of things in general, and with this one too. I did know that – I didn't know. I always felt that just because of the way athletes work, I did feel that Brady would not be ending his career in New England. I always felt in the bottom of my heart that he was just going to end it with the Raiders, just because it just seemed as though that's just the perfect situation. And I thought that, like, you know, 7 years ago, you know what I mean, 6 years ago, you know what I mean, just because the Raiders always seemed to be that place, you know what I mean, that people would just go, you know, and but this doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, I think it's just a natural way that very few athletes, honestly, even at the top of their profession and their careers with that same team, it's just the way it is, you know, which is fine.
Why the Bucs, do you think?
So what's that? Why the Bucs?
Yeah.
For Brady?
Is it just because, okay, I haven't had any talented receivers, now I'm going to have, like, studs? Is that it?
Am I naive to think it's a lot the weather also? I mean, like,
maybe.
Why not? I mean, dude, the guy is guy's in his 40s. He's got his hot wife, you know what I mean? Like, he's been slugging it out in the freaking snow for freaking 15 years, and not to mention Michigan before that. I mean, damn. I mean, like, this is the end of his
pretty good in
career.
LA.
I'm not. What's that?
The weather's pretty good in LA usually too.
Yeah, no. As opposed to LA, okay, it's fine. But But and the other thing is, I guess I'll ask you, as you know football better than I do, is you say you like Jameis better than Brady.
Well,
Not say like no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. Let me ask you another way. I want to say it the wrong way. You think that if you had 1 year, like this coming year, you think that Winston would do better in Tampa than Brady this actual one coming year?
that's where I'm struggling, because the one thing that they're really good at in Tampa is because of these receivers is they'll throw it up, and that's partly why the picks happen. They'll throw it up and let these guys have a chance at it. That's not exactly Brady's style.
Okay, it's okay. So you're saying it's not Brady's style?
He's not a guy. He can throw a long ball. Don't get me wrong. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about throwing a 50-50 ball 5 times to 10 times a game, which Jameis does every single game.
Listen, I don't know, and this is gonna make me start overthinking. I guess like, listen, Brady's been like he's been a freaking animal like his whole life. I mean, like he's played in Belichickville for as long as his career, you know, and they ran a really tight ship there, and that's why they're the best. That's why New England's just the best, and they did exactly what they had to do to win. And it's, to me, like Brady's like, it's YOLO time for him, man. You know, he's going to go down there to Tampa. I don't think he's got a single issue. I think that's probably a selling point for him, where you want to go YOLO it up and throw it down the field and throw 50-50 balls. I think he's going to have the time of his life down there, flicking the ball up in that system to whoever the hell wants to go down and get it. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, the difference, I think, what's that?
Maybe you're right.
I don't know. And then to think that, I mean, I'm really, again, the whole thing, I guess since I got into DFS, I realized, or I really feel like I have like no idea about football. You know what I mean? Because I'm one of those, like, I know what I see kind of guys.
Right.
And like the whole thing. And I'm like, and I'm saying, this guy Goodwin and Evans and O.J. Howard and even that other guy, the Perriman, whatever, these guys are freaking nuts. These guys are amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These New England guys are freaking clowns. How could Brady ever expect to? I mean, they're like excited about getting Mohamed Sanu there. You know what I mean? Like it's,
right.
I mean, how can Brady be expected to do anything? Now he's going to go down there with a freaking coach who's fully willing to let Ryan Fitzpatrick just air it out. You think that Brady's not going to just have a good old time, get freaking 500 plus passing yards in a tuxedo this year?
No,
I don't know. I think it's going to be. If you put a gun to my head, I say that Tampa finishes with a better record than New England.
Okay.
And I think that New England literally has, I would say, zero chance to win the Super Bowl. I mean, I would say like literally zero. And I would say I would actually give Tampa a better chance to win the Super Bowl than New England.
You know, I think Brady thinks that Tampa can win the Super Bowl. I actually do. They were a sneaky, like tough pick last year, and the truth is, they probably should have won about 5 more games. They could have easily been a playoff team last year. So if you just factor in, minimize the damage, Arians is a really good coach. They have great offensive stuff. They've got a defensive pass rush that can get pressure on you. I just think I kind of am leaning towards you on this one. I just can't see Belichick's teams ever. It's been since the Browns that they haven't been competitive. So I can't picture how they're not going to be right there. I don't even know who the quarterback is, though. I just have a lot of faith in Belichick, and I feel like this could end up.
I don't know how good Belichick is at throwing the ball, though.
What's that?
I don't know how good Belichick is at throwing the football, though.
Yeah, but I mean, what do you need? You don't need that much. Like, it's not like Tom Brady was was lighting it up last year. I mean, they were winning with defense last year. Brady was not the one helping them get wins last year. That was the truth. I mean, at least as far as I saw, there was a lot of opportunities he had in a lot of games to make plays, and he didn't. Now, a lot of that I give it to probably one of the worst skill possession teams. I mean, skill set receiver like out around him of anybody in the NFL. Between just, I like Edelman, but as a true number one with no real number, like it was just a mess. I don't know.
Well, I will also tell you this, you know, as someone who's like from New York and kind of like always like kind of the anti-Boston sports thing, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And literally, I think if I've had the look, I would find my Boston Sucks T-shirt from 1977, like in my archive somewhere. That's how long I go back. From when Bucky Dent. Anyway, I have to say, I was always wondering in my head whether, as you get older, it's not as quite a strong sense as it used to be. But I always wonder whether I just didn't like the Patriots or I didn't like Brady. I really thought that, and I think this answered my question. I'm like totally rooting for the Bucks this year. I really am. I'm totally rooting for them. And I guess that just answered my question. I guess it has nothing to do with Brady. I guess it must be the uniform, or because I didn't really mind Belichick himself too much. I certainly had no problem with him when he was on New York. You know, when he was with the Giants. So I guess it's just the uniform. I guess I just can't. Maybe since I bet on the Patriots plus the points over the Bears in the Super Bowl and lost by 35. Maybe I'm just still bitter about that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I hear you. I thought it'd be fun instead of talking about football. Let's talk about basketball awards.
Yep.
Why not?
Oh.
We may not have a season, so let's talk about some awards. Like, okay, so I'll go first in case maybe a name doesn't, jog your memory right off.
Please, yeah.
So sixth man of the year. Let's start with that one. Not an easier one. I think this one's actually really easy, and I don't think it's something that jumps out at everybody, but I think that he would win it if it happened. It's Dennis Schroeder, and I don't even see anybody being that close this year. It's hard, it's not a Harrell year. It's not a Lou Williams year. I really don't know who else our argument would be for, but Schroeder, maybe not a household name, but I don't know who's the better sixth man.
Well, let's do this. Just try to help me out here since I wasn't prepared. Give me, in addition to your pick, give me like two other guys that people have been talking about for that award, so that maybe I can like chime in on those to jog my thoughts a little bit.
I would say Montrezl Harrell would be another guy who people consider. Look, you can argue that he's a very important part of the whatever. So you hear different things every day out here about Harrell, but I guess he would be the one I would lean towards. I just couldn't go with Lou Williams this year.
Who else is out there?
There's not. It's an unusual year where a lot of these really good teams don't really have a great sixth. Even like I'm trying to think of all the guys who I would even consider, and like honestly, this is weird because he wouldn't even be in my rookie of the year conversation. Like he wouldn't be this for me, but like. I mean, you got Kobe White. Like, that's not an ideal, he's a guy who might win it next year if he's still a sixth man, but I doubt he will be. Got it. It's just not the big year of the sixth man. I think this is a tough position this year, other than Schroeder. I don't really see a whole lot of.
I think that, again, it's so fun. I don't know when the sixth man of the year thing just kind of started. Because I remember when I grew up, like, there was really just like kind of one, like, sixth man. There was,
Havlicek.
No, I'm not that old. It was, Havlicek's pretty fun. It was Vinny Johnson.
Vinny Johnson, yeah.
Yeah. So he was like the only like sixth man worth mentioning, and I think that, I don't really think about the sixth man. Maybe the sixth man is not as big of a deal anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but the guys you said, I guess Harrell's going to win, I suppose.
There's been really important sixth men to be. Like we had a sixth man who was the MVP of the NBA Finals a few years ago with the Warriors. Over three guys who were all-stars. And
who?
Sure.
Iguodala?
Iguodala, yeah. I'm just going to take a quick look and see if I'm missing anybody else on this, because I'll just get the betting odds and see who else we got. Yeah, I think that it would be – this is before the year, obviously. This is a terrible article. Okay. I don't really see anybody else who stands out to me. Honestly – this is not all the guys who are your usual guys are just not the guys. If Seth Curry was still a sixth man officially, he would count, but he's not. He's been starting with that team. He would be a great one. He's having a terrific season.
That's true.
Anybody from the – honestly, it would just be hard to find anyone else.
Yeah.
For me, I think that's pretty much it for the sixth man. How about we get to another one? Let's get to something that maybe matters.
You want to do – what about most improved player? Do you know that one?
Let's do that one. That's an easy one for me.
Who is it?
It's Bam for me.
Ooh, interesting. I didn't think of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think – so the other guy I would pick would be Jason Tatum. I don't really know how – so they both have taken leaps. I guess Tatum has obviously Tatum taken probably the bigger leap because Bam was sort of on a good trajectory. Tatum was why did he let us down his second year kind of a thing. So narrative-wise, I think maybe it would go to Tatum. But I think Bam has taken an actual he's become a legitimate top-level all-star, where Tatum was on the verge anyway and is just still barely made it. Tatum's a better player, don't get me wrong. But I would give Bam the edge here. I just think his leap is just a little bit too large. And also, the team is just much, much better than they were. And yeah, sure, they have Jimmy Butler, but a huge portion of that has to do with Bam.
Yeah, he's awesome. And, it was only last year that he was basically just fighting for playing time, whatever Hassan Whiteside would just allow him, and And I think I don't need to convince you that between those two guys, I don't think it's even close. Yeah, I mean, I just remember games where he actually was like entrusted to guard Harden. You remember that game where he was where they had him on Harden and stuff like that? And he's had some triple doubles, I think, this year also. Maybe has he had triple doubles? He was close, I think.
I think he did. And what I would also give him credit for too is he's one of the best defensive players in the NBA and doesn't really get credit. By the way, I give Tatum similar credit. He's not one of the. I think Jaylen Brown's still the better defender, but they're both excellent defenders. And that's one thing I like about both these guys. Why they're better than their numbers would even lead you to believe.
So I heard a really, really kind of awesome take on a Most Improved Player award. He just didn't. He's just not quite there. But he also was injured a little bit too much. And this would have been a pretty awesome one. Is to go right back to back.
One I forgot. Sorry, sorry. Go ahead.
Who?
Keep going. There's another guy we forgot about, but you keep going. I want you to finish.
I was going to go right back to back with Siakam again.
Wow. That's not the worst call in history. I actually like that. I just think now Tatum is a better player, and Siakam was a better player last year. That's just my personal.
Yeah, but he's a guy that he's good. He's right. I'll just say he's good.
What about a great one there's actually quite a good number of guys for this category. I think Shea would be in this category. Yep. I think Brandon Ingram sort of got forgotten about towards the end because of Zion, but I felt like, before Zion came back, I think he would have almost run away with this unless someone picked Devontae Graham or Luka. And then it's just sort of flattened out where Bam and Tatum were on the middle of this highest step. So those are the guys I would lean with. But I do have to say, I think that Devontae Graham would be a really good argument. He sort of more fits the stereotype of a guy he's become a legit NBA starter and on a competitive, even though not great team, and is actually got a future where he's a part of a franchise. And a year ago, he was literally a guy who may not have lasted 2 years in the NBA. That's a pretty big swing.
Graham is very, very good.
This is a tough category, actually. There's a lot more guys than I thought when I started looking at some of the odds.
What about now? I guess not to be too depressing, but they're gonna give awards out?
I mean, no matter what happens, even without a season, I feel that they should.
Yeah.
I don't really see why they would have to, look, we're already being punished by not being able to see the games. Like, why can't we talk about what we saw?
So are we in consensus, by the way, with Giannis or no?
If you think Giannis, we are, because I think Giannis.
Okay, good.
But I do think that it got closer. I think that the season could have played out, and if the Lakers even would have ended with more wins, I think honestly it would have been LeBron. All the metrics and every advanced stat will tell you that Giannis is having one of the great seasons. But, I mean, what LeBron's done is incredible. It's just he does have Anthony Davis, and as much as I love LeBron, I truly think that the heart of what they do on their Lakers team that's been so great is between Vogel and Davis. They've really built an incredible defensive system. They're the most physical team in the NBA now. Outside the Rockets, but it's hard to be physical when you're 4 feet tall. I just really like what they've done. So I don't know. I think it's more Giannis as the one who I would pick. I still think that it might go to LeBron, but I do think there's not even anybody else in the conversation. If Luka had played the full year and maybe if they had about 5 or 6 more wins, you could maybe talk about him. But
Matt, who's going to have a better season this year, Tampa or New England? Okay.
What did he say? Tampa?
He's in with New England.
Oh, he's in with New England. Okay.
He's in with New England.
He's going on. I think it's going to be really interesting. I actually think that's a good bet on its own. Let's talk. I think the MVP is the easiest discussion because there's only 2 people.
How about Rookie of the Year?
Rookie of the Year is also, it's either the easiest or hardest discussion you've ever played. I think that you just have to give it because Ja Morant statistically is having a year that only 2 other guards have ever had, where he shoots averages 17.6 and 17.6 and 4 as a rookie, but you also shoot above 49% from the floor. It's a 3-man list. It's Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, and Ja Morant. It's very hard. If there was no Ja Morant this year, I actually think Zion should win it. I know it sounds crazy because you didn't play enough games, but when you're that much better than everyone else is, and Zion is better than Ja Morant, they're both excellent. But Ja Morant has had a great year. The team's a playoff team as of right now. That's unheard of to start the season. I just think that there's no question it would have to go to Ja right now.
Matt, should they give Zion the Rookie of the Year? He didn't play enough games yet. They're going to probably do awards at the end of the season. Like if they stop the season like now, for example, has Zion played enough games for Rookie of the Year, you think? No.
Yeah, same page.
No.
Same page. We got the toughest one is coming up though. We got one more.
I don't know what it is. Oh, Defensive Player of the Year?
No, actually, I was going to go Coach of the Year.
Ooh.
Because I feel like there are like three like guys I can't even.
Coach of the Year.
I think it's actually really. I think it's so tough. How do you say to Mike Budenholzer, Bucks coach?
Yeah.
How do you say that you don't deserve Coach of the Year for what he's done? Now that team has been winners without Giannis this year. They've been winners even when they've been resting multiple guys in addition to Giannis. And not only that, they have the second greatest point differential in NBA history. He was the first for a while. It's hard not to give the coach to that guy, but the problem is, if there's one guy who had to deal with a lot of stuff, I mean, Nick Nurse lost arguably the best player in the NBA on a team that was supposed to like literally be like, what they picked, I think it's a 6 or 7 or 8 seed in the playoffs. And they're they're competitive. They can beat a lot of teams. The other guy is Frank Vogel. Frank Vogel, like the Lakers are, even with LeBron being all that, Frank Vogel made this team into an elite defensive team where these guys were all on terrible. Anthony Davis might be a good defender. New Orleans was always terrible defensively while he was there. Dwight Howard is a very talented defender. He was great in his youth. But, him and JaVale McGee are sort of, at this stage, it was almost like comical that they were the centers for an NBA championship type team. But they got these big bodies to get physical. Then you get Danny Green in there, and you get a great system with a great coach. You can make up for LeBron not even playing defense a lot of the time. And Frank Vogel's done a great job. So I'm happy to give it to any of those guys. I think I would probably lean Budenholzer, but that's just me. It's really close.
Yeah. So my son with his bad take on his way up to his room, he's coming in with Steve Kerr. I get where he's coming from. Okay. But
what's the argument exactly for Steve Kerr though? Because
that's what I'm saying. The bad take literally as he escapes running up to his room to not get grilled on the argument. Those are the 17-year-olds for you.
Is he a good coach? Has he done a good job? Like, can you give him the coach next year? Like, if somehow Andrew Wiggins has developed and it's because of that they credit this time that they had while they were together, maybe then you could do it retroactively. But I don't see how you can do it right now. But
so I feel as though of the guys you said, I'm just not into the Vogel one. I'm just not into the give me LeBron and AD and then give me Coach of the Year. I'm just kind of not into it. You know what I mean? Like I know what you're saying.
Yeah, that's fine.
And it perfectly makes a lot of sense. But I think that it's hard to deny the record of not even the record of Milwaukee, but like just the point differential and the way they basically are just like toy with teams in a way. You know what I mean? Like their whole mantra this whole season is let's see how little we can play Giannis. You know what I mean? And that's their goal. And yet still they're winning 1 billion games, and like you said, I mean, with Giannis, and it took me a while to come around to this, but with Giannis out of the game, I mean, that's like the most demoralizing thing. I tweeted about this once. Like those stretches where Giannis is sitting and Milwaukee like extends the lead on somebody.
Yeah.
It must like just take all the freaking life out of another team. You know what I mean? Like when they see Giannis sitting on the bench and the lead gets extended, like, oh crap, just kill me immediately. You know what I mean? So it's that's how, but with that said, also I think that the Toronto guy, that's a really, really good one, man. I mean, you lose one of the top 5 best players in basketball, and you I don't want to say miss a beat. I wouldn't say won't miss a beat, but you're, I mean, clearly one of the top 2 teams in the Eastern.
I mean, they've had Fred VanVleet's missed like 30% of their games. Lowry missed like 10 games. Siakam missed like 15. I mean, like they all miss games.
But then again, don't forget, like if you get a voted Coach of the Year in Toronto, you get fired. So that you can't. It's kind of a bad thing to happen. But
it happened. Denver did that with George Karl once, where they won. He won Coach of the Year. They had the best record in the NBA, and he was fired.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's hey, at least they can't be accused of being results oriented, right?
The Red Sox before Cora fired their manager after winning the World Series. That's even the most extreme one I've seen.
All right. So how about defensive player of the year?
I think that that's the craziest reason why I think that it might. I think it's Anthony Davis or Giannis personally. I could make a lot of good cases for a lot of people. Bam, probably not Bam, but I think he's up. I think he's closer than probably people think. I don't know. I feel like I should have a few more options. Give me something you're thinking of.
So again, just to be a pain in the neck, how was Rudy Gobert's defensive season this year?
I think it was a huge down year for him, but he still is a great defender. But I would not give it to him.
Okay. Yeah, it's so fun. It's so fun. I never really think. I guess I've become that person now that like just look at these things as DFS things. I never really thought about the defense people play sometimes. I didn't even realize to think of Anthony Davis as like an elite defender. I mean, but he just is. Now that I'm kind of thinking about it in this way, it definitely is. The other thing I'll mention for Coach of the Year, again, you have to in some form give, put the record. It makes that you have to have the win-loss record mean something. Right. But I will say again, just from a technical perspective, I mean, for me, the best coach is just going to be Brad Stevens until further notice. But even so, he's not going to be a Coach of the Year.
Yeah, but
he didn't deserve it.
Really deserve it ahead of those guys right now.
No, he doesn't.
I don't think he's the best coach in basketball. I do think he's one of them, but I think I think it's hard to not look at Nick Nurse and Mike Budenholzer and go, okay, this is getting to be pretty consistent. Even Vogel was great in Indiana. Like he's a terrific coach.
Yeah. So
defensive player of the year.
I guess. Can you give it to Giannis if you're going to give him the MVP?
Yes, I think that's partly why he gets it, in my opinion. It's not as fun.
And there's no guys we're forgetting about, right? There's no these Patrick. I don't say Patrick Beverly is the person, but is there any like Patrick Beverly guy that I'm thinking of?
Smart is the answer to that question.
Okay.
And the guy who I think deserves probably a little bit more credit wouldn't get it for full defense because the team hasn't been good. But Ben Simmons is just as good. Right. He's the kind of defender I want more than like almost anybody because he's so versatile. And not that Giannis isn't, but Giannis, they're not going to ask Giannis to guard the point guards where that's who Ben Simmons primarily guards. Anthony Davis, though, would be my pick, I think, just with the Lakers being what they are. And honestly, you could just take the fact that, with him going over there, it's not like they added a whole bunch. They added other pieces, but like, while Bradley's a solid defender and Green is definitely an excellent defender and KCP has been a good defender in the past. These guys, a lot like Bradley and KCP were there last year. LeBron was there last year. Dwight Howard, JaVale was there. Dwight Howard and Anthony Davis weren't, and Frank Vogel wasn't. And they've gone from being one of the worst, if not the worst defensive team in the NBA potentially, to arguably being the best.
All right. I have just another sport question. I've been just thinking about it, thinking about asking it because we never really talked about this as much as maybe we could have or should have or maybe will. So let's say that God forbid, God willing, get a handle on this virus a little bit, slowly but surely get important stuff like schools back and things like that, and people can walk the streets and things like that. And let's say that July 1, the MLB comes out and starts a season, or June 15th. I want to be realistic. You know what I mean? Like, let's say at some point MLB starts a season. Finally, they get some sports back. You think they still hit all the Astros guys?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
I mean,
there you go. All right.
I have a theory that maybe the Astros have put them up to this. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, it is like nobody's more hate. It's going to be whenever it comes back. Can you picture a night like the nightmare that team is going to have to go through this year?
So wait. So what's the plan? Again, I don't want to be insensitive. So what's the plan with the Astros? And so is each team the first time they play them going to throw at the first batter, or is there like something that people are expecting?
No. It's been happened. It happened all through spring training. It's going to.
So it's not out of the system yet, though. They're going to keep doing it in the regular season.
What's going to start happening really quickly is both teams are going to start off with an automatic warning, which means the player will be ejected.
Yeah. Now,
all that means is that just we have to keep an eye on. Well, first of all, we probably shouldn't be playing a lot of pitchers against the Astros in general, anyway. But if it came down from a DFS standpoint, I think that you just can't play people against them because they're going to get hit, especially early in the year, assuming that we play.
But do you think every team's got to when they play them, like the first game, the first pitcher's got to just?
It has to be the first pitcher, I think there will be a period in. So the over/under was 83.5 for them. I think it's jumped since then a lot.
What, in total hit by pitches for the season?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's not like guaranteed that like every team is going to hit them the first game? I mean,
No. That's just what we all think will happen.
Okay.
And honestly, the fact that it's sort of bared out a little bit in spring training probably gives you an idea that it's probably going to keep happening.
So there's no way they could just like all like line up before the season and just take it from like all the pitchers and just have one big like one big firing line, you know what I mean? Just get it over with so we can play baseball again? Because I'm just not into that whole thing.
No, anyway, man, it's good talking to you. This is literally one of the better parts of my day. It's let's make fun of the rest of it, guys.
Yep.
And Sheets, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I'm good.
All right, bud. Just take it easy, and we'll see you guys later. Stay safe.